And then he said, "Right! I don't want any noise from you, do you understand?" "Okay, Father," said Fleer. And with that, the giant Idwal sat down in his chair and he fell fast asleep. Quickly and quietly, Fleer went across the kitchen. She reached the stairs, and as quiet as a mouse, she went up the stairs, one step at a time. Higher and higher she went, until she reached the giant's bedroom. She found the magic cupboard, and she took 3 things out of that cupboard. First, a comb. Second, a razor. Third, a mirror. She put the 3 things in a bag, tied up the bag, and then, quickly, quietly, she came back down the stairs, trying not to make any noise at all. Silently, she slipped across the kitchen floor, past the sleeping giant. She went to the door. She opened the door. She went through the door. She closed the door. And then she ran across the garden and ran up the hill to where Franken was waiting for her with his horse. And she yelled, "Franken, I'm here! And I've got the magic things, come on, we can run away and get married now, come on, help me on the horse." So Franken whoop, pulled her on the horse, and they both galloped and galloped and galloped and galloped away. Unfortunately, 20 minutes later, the giant Idwal woke up. And now he wanted a cup of tea. "Fleer, I want a cup of tea!" "Fleer, I want a cup of tea now!" Fleer? Fleer? He went upstairs to look for her. He looked in her bedroom, no sign of Fleer. He went to his bedroom, no sign of Fleer. He went downstairs to the kitchen, no sign of Fleer. He went into the living room, no sign of Fleer. He went outside into the garden, no sign of Fleer. He went up the hill. Who did he see in the distance but Fleer and Franken galloping and galloping away? Fleer! So he went to fetch his horse. The biggest horse you'd ever seen in your life. And on his horse he jumped and he started galloping and galloping after them, shouting, "Fleer, come back, I want a cup of tea!" On hearing the father's voice, Fleer turned round and she saw the giant Idwal galloping like the wind towards them. "Oh, Franken, my father's woken up, please make this horse go faster, come on, make this horse go faster." So Franken urged the horse onwards, and the horse galloped and galloped and galloped over the hills, over the fields, over the hedges, over the rivers, galloped and galloped and galloped, and by this time the giant Idwal was getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, and suddenly Fleer remembered the first magic thing that she'd put in a bag, which was a comb. She pulled the comb out of a bag and she threw it behind her. The comb flew through the air and landed on the floor just in front of the giant Idwal's horse. All of a sudden, something grew. A forest. The giant got off his horse and started walking through the forest, pulling twigs and branches out of the soil. And the twigs and the branches started scratching at his face. And by the time he got to the other side of the forest, he was covered in blood and really, really cross. He looked in the distance, and what he saw was Fleer and Franken galloping away. So he shouted once more, "Fleer, come back! I want a cup of tea!" On hearing her father's voice, Fleer turned around and she saw the giant Idwal coming out of the forest on his horse and galloping like the wind towards him once more. "Oh, Franken! Come on, he's coming after us! Quick, make this horse go faster! Come on, make him go faster!" So Franken urged the horse onwards, and the horse galloped and galloped and galloped over the fields, over the hedges, over the rivers, galloped and galloped and galloped, and by this time the giant Idwal was getting closer and 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 closer, and suddenly Fleer remembered the second magic thing that she put in her bag, which was a razor. She pulled the razor out of the bag and threw it behind her. Fa-dong! The razor flew through the air and landed on the floor just in front of the giant Hitler's horse. All of a sudden, something grew. Mountains! The giant got off his horse and he started walking up the mountain. It was a hot day, and as he walked, he was getting hotter and hotter. And as he got hotter and hotter, he started to sweat. And he got up to the top of the mountain and he pulled himself up and... Who did he see in the distance but Fleer and Franklin galloping away? So he shouted once more, "Fleer, come back, I still want a cup of tea!" On hearing her father's voice, Fleer turned round and she saw the giant eagle on top of the mountain, getting onto his horse and galloping like the wind towards him once more. "Oh, Franklin, he's coming closer, come on, make this horse go faster, come on, make him go faster!" So Franklin urged the horse onwards and the horse galloped and galloped and galloped over the fields, over the hedges, over the rivers, galloped and galloped and galloped, and by this time the giant eagle was getting closer and 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 closer and... Suddenly, Fleer remembered the third magic thing in her... Mirror. The mirror. She pulled the mirror out of her bag and she threw it behind her. Fa-dong! The mirror flew through the air and landed on the floor just in front of the giant eagle's horse. All of a sudden, something grew. A lake. A huge, wide, wet lake. And the giant looked at this lake and he knew he had a great problem because he couldn't swim. So back he went on his horse and he pulled the horse backwards. And then he pushed the horse onwards, and the horse galloped and galloped till it reached the side of the lake, and with one jump it leapt over the lake, and then halfway across the lake, that giant, he got so excited he fell off, and the horse landed safely on the other side, and the giant, fell. And that was the end of the giant Idwell. And Fleer and Francon, well, they walked happily down the mountain and to a village called Llanberis and got married. And if you ever get a chance to go walking in the mountains of Snowdonia with someone who knows what they're doing, you take care and keep an eye out for a valley called Cwm Idwell. And in that valley, there is a lake called Llyn Idwell, and that's the reason why.